Let me tell you about this guy.
I'll tell you about this fucker right here.
Yeah. The youngest Gen Zer is what right now?
I think around 12 or 13.
12 or 13?
Yeah. It's a big gap.
Do you feel like you have a lot in common with the 15-year? Do you have a lot in common with anyone 18 and under?
I don't think so. Or at least I have not noticed a good connection with anybody getting into like the teen range. All of me and my friends are around the same age, anywhere from like, I would say 23 or 24 to let's say 27-ish. And we all get along well, and I get along with a lot of people older than me, but getting into younger than like 22, there's not really, I start to lose that like connection with that age of Gen Z.
And 22, so that's really just 5 years.
So I'll say the biggest difference between my age group and somebody that's 22, or maybe let's say 21.
20. Okay.
20 to 21-ish.
Pre-alcohol, post-alcohol.
Yeah, pre and post-alcohol. But another big distinction that I've noticed in just development and talking with somebody around that age range to now is post-school, right? So maybe they didn't go to college, right? And I'm kind of leaving that out for now. But post-college, because in college, that's really when at least for me, I left the parent like household, but didn't fully go and live on my own, right? I went to school, I lived at school. And even when I lived at school during that time, if I didn't live off campus, I lived off campus with roommates. And that was kind of the whole time period of like, there's nobody really watching me or over me. I'm kind of just navigating in a safer environment, if you will, or like a more controlled environment, but kind of just navigating like on my own. The first time when it's really like you don't have to do anything, right? Like,
right.
If you don't want to, you don't really have to do anything.
Right. You don't want to clean that bathroom this month? You don't have to clean the bathroom this month.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's none of those figures of like, you have to do this.
So I got a question real quick.
Okay.
How disgusting was your place when you first moved out?
So it wasn't, but that was a me decision. So growing up, it was just really my mom and my sister, right? And our place wasn't like dirty, but me and my sister, just being completely honest, didn't do the best job at always like helping out and keeping it clean, at least the first part of our lives. When I started getting to around 12 or 13, I decided like, hey, I'm going to like change some of these things. And so started like picking up, doing my own laundry, things like that. Right. And I felt like we started helping out more then, or I was gone more. So I was contributing less to a mess, if you will. But when I moved out to college, we were not like always super organized. Things had it placed people. And I completely flipped like 180 when I moved out into school. So like my place, or at least area of my place, was always ridiculously clean. Now, the people I lived with, not always on the same page, but for the most part, our dorm room was actually relatively clean. I got lucky in that fact, and the people that I just kind of ended up living with in the dorm room, it was all relatively clean. It was also so I had the luck of going to a relatively new school, and the dorm room that I stayed in, this was only the second year it was open, or maybe first or second. And so everything was relatively new. So it wasn't really used. And our dorm room was also updated to the point of, I had it made compared to like my mom or whatever. Like, we had a washer and dryer in our dorm room. We had our own bathroom that was only shared between 4 people, and shower and stuff like that. So that kept things relatively clean.
Yeah.
My second year, I became a resident assistant, and the RAs got their own bedroom. So that was really where I had the most like control. And that was where like anybody walked into my room and it was like, why is it so clean in here? It's a little like disturbing. And my mom, I remember my mom and my sister would come visit every once in a while, and it was like, I raised you, because it wasn't the same at all. But yeah, so anyways, I don't feel like I connect with a lot of people in like their very early 20s, maybe 20 or 18 down, like you said. Especially getting into the younger Gen Z, like I don't feel like I connect with them at all. I don't even feel like they're in the same generation. And I don't know if it's just because they're 12 and 13, and so there's obviously a big brain development gap between then and now, or if that's the way they're gonna be. So like when they're my age, 25, 26, I still won't really connect with them at all. I'm not sure if it's a mixture of both or if it's just that, but yeah, I mean,
I can understand like the 13-year-olds not having anything in common with when you're basically twice their age.
Yeah,
right?
but even, so I'll get into a little bit deeper, like, right? Like, so even as I think about it, like even the closer to adult age, I don't really connect with. So one example, and people bring this up a lot, but one example for me is when I was 15, that day that I turned 15, I didn't go to school. I went with my mom to the DMV and I got my learner's permit. The day I turned 16, I did the exact same thing with my license, right? So there was no like lag in when I was eligible to go get it, I went and got it, right? And I started driving then, and I would also always ask to drive, for legal purposes. This was on private roads and things like that prior to me turning 15, right? But I was always like, I want to drive. I'm ready to drive. I'm ready to have that independence, be able to go wherever I would like to go, and things like that. And there's a lot of people that I know that are even my age, but especially around that like 20 to like 18-year-old range, whatever, that don't have their license, don't even have a learner's permit, have never driven a car in their life. And I don't get that. I don't understand that. Even I could kind of understand like the, oh, well, I don't have a car or whatever, but even just getting your license, like I don't get that part.
I think there's a lot of fear in Gen Z. I think that's why they're so willing to forfeit so much freedom, is because with freedom comes responsibility, and they're afraid of that. So they just rather have somebody else be responsible.
Yeah, I don't know, like, that's the part I just don't connect with. I've never been one to shy away from being responsible for something. If anything, it bothers me when somebody looks at me or my age and is like, you're not ready to be responsible for that. It irritates me. I'm like, hang on.
But it's like there's a lot of Gen Z that they're fearful, right? And they turn away from responsibility. They turn away from power and authority because it's just too much responsibility and they don't want it. They're afraid of it.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's a way that like the younger half of Gen Z is being raised. I don't know if it's a social media thing. I mean, I'm sure there's a part of it that has to do with some of them and like COVID, because basically they're starting pre-adolescence and, at puberty or whatever. And then all of a sudden they now have to stay inside for 3 years or whatever the case is, right? And distance from people and not interact with people like in person on a social level. So I don't know if like that's part of it or if it's just all three of those things, but it's very, I don't know, it was very different for me. Like you talk about the experiences of like, we stayed out until the street lights came on, whatever, right? Played outside. But for me and my friends, like we did the same thing. So I think people also like have that misconception that like we never did that, because at least people my age that I know, we all did that.
I kind of think that's also a Southern thing also.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's part of it too.
I don't think that happened in like LA.
Yeah, because I grew up in the South, born in Alabama. I was raised in Florida, right? Florida people kind of do all kinds of things and are kind of crazy in their own way. So, maybe that is just a Southern thing, but like that's what we still did. But knowing people from that area and like younger kids from that area, I don't know if that's still happening as much.
I think it's interesting because, we'll go Gen X. I would call us a fiercely independent generation. And Gen Z appears to be a fiercely dependent generation.
Yeah.
But you're talking about, and this might be the first generation where my micro generation theory is coming into play, where it's like your generation is really two generations, like 8 years apart or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like it's completely different. Like I feel like if those that are defining the generational, whoever makes that final decision or whatever, I don't remember. I know we've researched it a little bit before. If they took a closer look at the Gen Z generation and looked at the differences between the ones that are in adulthood and the ones that are not, I think that you could define them completely differently. Their demeanor, the way they act. Obviously, but even your generation and the boomers especially, right? They call us all super sensitive and soft, right? Which I understand where they get that connotation, and that's fine. I never really noticed it for myself or for the people around me until I started interacting with people that are in Gen Z, but on the younger side of things. The way that they respond to certain, like, the way you and I would, or me and my friends would, like, dick around with each other, basically, and, like, do mean things, but we were all, like, having fun or whatever. The way that they respond to that is it's much quicker to, like, frustration and agitation than I would say I had when I was their age. Because I feel like the things that I do to my friends now are the same things that I've been doing for years since I, was a teenager. And like fucking around with each other and shit like that. And I would say we've been doing those things for a long time, but I've noticed that, like, when I do those things to the same things that I would have been doing as a teenager to somebody that's a teenager now, the response, they can take it, but not for nearly as long. And depending on what is said or what is done, it gets a completely different reaction than when I was that age. It's very interesting to see. And that's where I kind of feel like that difference in generation really starts to take place. Yeah.
Like I was watching this short, and it was this girl, I'd say she's 20 years old. And she was complaining about how she had to work 40 hours a week and paid rent, and after she paid her rent, it only left like $300 for her phone, cable, and food, and it's not nearly enough. How do you live like this? And it's like, what? You have a roommate. I mean, you do the math before you move out, and you get the roommate. But you went straight to college, and she didn't. If you didn't go to college, what would you have done?
I would have, if I didn't go to college, I would have definitely chosen to live with somebody, right? So I would say, actually, I know for sure what I would have done. If I didn't go to college, so my best friend, he stayed in roughly the local area. He still went to college, but stayed in roughly the local area and went to a community college there first, and was working and all of that stuff. And I think that him and I would have lived together if we wanted to move out still at that age. I think that him and I would have lived together, and I think the path I would have gone down was I would have so in high school I did some HVAC stuff, I would have went into that field, I think, if I didn't go into college. And I think him and I would have lived together. But I would have lived with somebody. I don't think that I would have just moved out on my own and was like, yeah, I can afford this. Even when I was in college and I wasn't living on campus, I never felt like I should live alone. Even if I was making enough money to technically live alone, I would have never have done that. And I have friends now who make very good money, like they're engineers and all of that stuff, and they make very good money, and they don't live alone. They don't choose to live alone. They live with a roommate because they don't see the point in living alone and spending the outrageous amount of money that it costs to live alone without a person.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there is this misconception of my generation that when you turn 18 or you're in adulthood that you have to like instantly jump out on your own when you leave your parents. Whereas I think there is that in between state of having a roommate, whether it's a roommate in college or a roommate while you're working or whatever, that still gives you that independence of being an adult, but is not necessarily like killing yourself to try to make your ends meet.
Or like 17, 18-year-olds is chomping on the bit to move out of the house.
I mean, I don't think so. I don't see that, at least. I definitely do not see that. Most of them are still at home. That is where the difference is in some of the friends I have versus the other ones. Like, there are some that are definitely still living.
So I kind of wonder if jumping to live by themselves right away is because they're already at home and their relationship is more like a roommate than a parent.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do these things. You have to earn your keep when you're in this household. Here's the rules of the house. As long as you live under this roof, you're going to follow these rules type of thing. And so you're already a roommate. So the next logical step is to have your own place, right? And so I wonder if that's where that jump is. I don't have my own place. I'm living with roommates, aka parents.
Yeah.
So now I got to get my own place.
Yeah. Well, and I think where it's screwing you up too is like with the whole, I think where it is screwing them up, everything being digital and all your interactions being digital. If you are forced to live and negotiate with another person that is not family, that if you've only had digital interactions your entire life,
mm-hmm.
or for most of your, like while you're going through puberty, I could see how that could really screw you up into thinking that like, I don't want or know how to live with another person that isn't my family member.
Does it go back to fear again?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know. It may be a fear thing. I mean, sure, being out in the world as far as like having to pay for all of your own stuff is scary, but I feel like that's what the roommate is for and really helps with. But if you're really scared to even live with a person that isn't like your family member, I mean, I could see that keeping you from that. Yeah, I don't know. Hey, the other thing too that I noticed, and I wrote it down here as well, that it was kind of along the same lines as the driver's license thing, is the working when it's not officially work. So like when I was 16, I got my first official like tax job, right?
Right.
I got a job that was like official by the government, whatever, right? Had the W-4 and the W-2 and all of that good stuff. But before then, from 12 to 16, I was always looking for odd work that I could get paid for unofficially by others, to whether it was cut grass, clean up yards, whatever the case may be, right? And we've talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really feel like that happens now. I do not have a single person in my neighborhood or in any of the neighborhoods that are adjacent to me that have children that are in that like 12, 13, 14-year-old range that are offering to cut grass or do things to make money prior to them being an adult.
I've run across that too. I was, being a homeowner, moving neighborhoods, that kind of stuff. Even like small yards, I was kind of thinking there would be kids but it's all landscaping companies, and they want to charge a lot because they have all the overhead and that kind of stuff. And they do more than mowing lawns. And, you look around and trying to find a way to give some of these kids some money and that type of thing. And they're just uninterested.
Yeah.
Are parents giving them too much money so they don't have to learn how to earn it?
I don't know. I saw something recently. I don't know if it was on social media, and I've actually have adult friends in work who do this. They talk, or the kids talk about their allowance, and I'm like, allowance? I did not grow up with an allowance at all. I mean, sure, my mom absolutely, like, if there were things when I was younger that I wanted to do that I was like, hey, can I have some money for this or whatever? There were definitely times where she could help. I'm not saying we lived like I'm not saying that I come from like a super impoverished life. So I don't get it to that level, but like there was no allowance.
Right.
There was no money for just existing and being there. If we wanted the amount of extra money that I wanted, I had to go and do whatever odd jobs. We put out a sign in front of our yard, and actually had some friends of ours that put out a sign in front of theirs that I made by hand that basically said, contact this number, which was my mom's number for me to go and do like cut grass essentially. And I would walk up and down the street in our neighborhood and put basically handmade like business cards in people's mailboxes, like advertising
federal
cut
offense.
Grass. Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on that one. I had somebody call me and was basically like, it's a federal offense for you to put like this stuff into my mailbox and all that stuff. I'm like, sir, I'm 12. I'm like, I'm just trying to like advertise cutting grass.
There's always one.
Yeah. And I'm like, you're such a dick.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck?
Next time I'll put it against a rock using a rubber band and throw it through your window.
Yeah. But then like there was lots of times, like I had this one really large house that had a huge property. I showed up with my push mower, and she like kind of looked and she was like, I don't know if I necessarily like put the 2 and 2 together of like a 13-year-old with their push mower coming out here. And they paid me really well because the property was huge, and I literally stood it out there, and they let the grass grow really tall. And I stood out there with a push mower and like just did what I could, right? I don't even think I actually finished the whole thing in the day because it was so much work, and they paid me well. And like I feel like that kind of thing just doesn't happen anymore, and I don't fully understand why. Like I don't know, like I said, I don't know if it's a raise.
I think parents are lazy, so they don't want to deal with the tantrum. They don't want to deal with the whiny kid. And so when a kid wants something, they say no, then the kid whines. Okay, fine. Just shut him up. Shut up the kid. Right? And they just get anything just by doing that. When I was growing up, I got, we'll call it an allowance, but it was, you're this age. No, I mean, I'm 6 years old. There's not a lot of things I can do. But I would have to walk around the house and put all the shoes away. And at the end of the week, I think I got 50 cents, Then got older. It's very specific. You do this, you get this money.
Yeah.
And my parents did that deliberately to teach us the value of money and then kind of how to manage money.
And I'm okay with that. Like my wife and I have talked about doing that kind of thing for our kids. And we've even actually talked about like, I know some people that do that for their kids, and they even go a step further, as in like, okay, I'm their kid or whatever. I want this game, right? But I didn't save up my like chore money or whatever the case may be for this game. Can I have money to like buy it? And then you just take it out of my future chore money, right? And I know them to go as far as like, fine, but you won't just repay back me the chores that you owe me. You're also going to do the extra work because there's interest on that money, right? Which is a real life thing. You borrow money, there's interest on it almost always, right? So like, I don't mind doing those things, but an allowance just for kind of like existing in the household, I don't understand that part, and I never got that. And I don't know, like, it's just weird. There's definitely not the same drive, and I don't really quite understand why, I guess.
Do you think, I guess it goes back to earlier, do you think it's like one half of your generation, your half is raised by a Gen Xer, and then the second half of your generation is raised by a millennial?
Maybe. I mean, that might be the case. I don't know. It, like, I don't know if it's how, like, who is raising them. I do know that there's definitely a difference between, like, how I would respond to a situation with a child that wants something and how I was raised to respond versus maybe how some others would, like the whole, hey, they're just crying, so just give them what they want type of scenario.
Mm-hmm. And I just point and laugh at them. Yeah,
I don't feel any, like, inclination to do that. And there was definitely times when, so I won't out her too much, but my sister, right? There were times where she would throw tantrums about things, but my mom was very adamant about not giving in to whatever that tantrum was. And I think that trait of, like, not just trying to distract them or, you know, just give in to the tantrum, even though it's annoying. I think that that's a very, like, key skill in a parent that raises a kid to be one way versus another. Yeah, it was definitely just like, okay, I'm just going to leave you here crying. Like, you let me know when you're done.
Middle of the cereal aisle, throwing the tantrum, the parents looking at you, people are starting to gather, and you're just, like, looking at them like, where are your parents? And leave.
Yeah. And like, my wife is definitely a one step further kind of person. And I think that's just raised being in a Hispanic household.
I'll whoop your ass in public.
Yeah, like, my wife, she was telling me the other day, we were going through a store, and she was like, we heard, like, a kid, like, crying or whatever. And she was like, you know, if our kid starts to do that when we go into the store, I'm just going to tell him I'm never taking you with me again. And she was very serious about it. Like, no, you can just stay home, because remember that one time you cried last time you went to the store with me? I was like, oh God, that's a little harsh. Like, I would at least give him a couple of second chances. Like, shit. But yeah, like, I don't know if parents are really like that anymore. It's very much like, here's the iPad. Here's the iPad when we go on road trips. If you're bored, here's an iPad or a phone or whatever. Watch these videos, right? And I didn't really have that growing up. Like, my mom was very much still the person for a long time of just, let me print out the map, and I'm going to use the printout to figure out where I'm going. And they're like, she wasn't using the phone. So I don't know if that's changed things that much, that it's just.
Yeah. I remember it's like, you had, like, coloring books or something if you're going on a long trip.
Yeah, but people don't believe me. Like, I get the comment a lot from much older people of like, oh, it wasn't like that back in my day. You guys had this. And it was like, but when I was growing up, unless you had money, it really wasn't.
Right.
Like, if you were lower middle class, that's not how it worked for you. It was still very much like, we have the printout directions. You don't have a phone to just watch the whole time or whatever. You may have had, like, some sort of portable music, right? Like, I had, like, MP3 players and stuff like that, but that was it.
I was smarter before technology.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I can give you, like, 2 phone numbers off the top of my head. When I was a kid, 12, not a problem. You know, there was no memory in the phone, so you had to memorize it up here.
Yeah.
And you got used to using that thing so much. Directions, yeah. When you get that map that you have to pull out to get directions to go somewhere, you only do that once. Then you remember, because it's a pain in the butt to fold that map up to that right thing. And
yeah, I know when I was growing up in my area, I knew where everything was off the top of my head. And I'm not nearly as much like that now, right? Like, when I go to a new area, I definitely have to do the route multiple times before I remember. Whereas before, I could do it once, maybe twice, and I knew where I was going.
I go to Wenatchee, I have to, like, use the GPS to get onto the main road.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that maybe, like, just a kid growing up with that and never being forced to have to do it is kind of what is starting to cause that. And the thing is that like as the adults, we kind of do it to them. I'm okay with faulting somebody, you know, especially getting into their older years of like, look, there's a point where you just have to make your own decisions, and I get it. But being so young, like, there's really only a couple of faults to, you know, point the finger at, and it's typically the parent, unfortunately, where the parent passes it off to the education system, which doesn't really do them any good either. So it's still, it can still be an issue.
Do you think the personality gap that you have with the other half of your generation, do you think that personality gap exists with millennials?
Like this, as in like an older millennial versus a younger millennial? I don't think so. And I do think it exists somewhat, but not in the same way. And the reason I say that is because you and I are having, I know you're not a millennial, but you and I are having this conversation, right? Gabby and I have good friends that are older millennials, right? So the connection is still there, and I don't have any problem relating to older millennial generations, right? And a lot of our friends are in that state. So whereas I'm on the cusp of like the end of Gen Z. So I don't think the people that are just 3 years older than me or 4 years older than me have any problem really relating to like an older millennial. I don't see the gap nearly as much, but I definitely see a gap between my set of friends in my age group versus a really young one. And like I said, I don't know if that's just they're 12 and 13 and that's just how it is.
But how many 12 and 13-year-olds are really around?
Yeah, well, hopefully not too much.
Because I really look at it as you're probably going to be around the 17 to 20-year-olds more than 12 to 13-year-olds.
Yeah. I will say my sister is a teacher. My mom is a counselor, both in public education. And my sister especially now is, I believe now she teaches middle school. So around that age. So she interacts with them a lot. And from at least what I understand, the stories that I get back, there is a huge difference between the way that like her age group or my age group acted at that age and the younger ones now. So I don't know. It's very interesting. I'm very curious to see, like, I'd like to have the same conversation as long as we're still doing this when they are closer to
like 5 years from now.
Yeah. Then they are closer to this age range to see if I still feel the same way. But yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I feel like everything is moving faster now. Cycling through your pop culture is going faster. Your social media and everything is moving everything faster. So what you liked 2 years ago, you still like today, but what they liked is like, oh, that's 100 years ago. That's
completely different. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And speaking of things you like, you guys should like, comment, and subscribe on our podcast.
Absolutely. Hit the notification bell.
Yeah, hit the notification bell if you want to hear more discussions like this. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't connect very well. I don't see it, and I've noticed more recently the things that what older generations complain about, like people my age. I don't really notice in people my age, but I do notice in that like 12 to 15 or 16, like subset of my generation.
Right. So what is one thing that my generation bitches about your generation that you think is legit?
That I think is legit about my whole generation or about like people my age?
Let's go with your age.
Okay. People my age that you guys bitch about that I think is like
factual.
100% true, or like for the most part factual.
And I'm saying it doesn't have to be bad, so to speak. It could be, and that's the way it is. For example, it could be we could bitch about your music and you just say, yeah, fucking bad.
Well, I don't know if I would say like the music. I mean, yes, that probably is one thing that you guys do bitch about and is common. Um, I would say that something that you guys, complain about or bitch about my generation that or my age group that is true is the not wanting to go out and do things.
Mm.
I will say the for me and the friends that I have is it's a mix, right? We all go out and do things at times, but then there's also times where you're like, I don't want to do anything, right? But I feel like that's a lot of people. You just like get in those moods where like I don't want to do anything. And I feel like that kind of spans generation is not necessarily specific to us. But I would say overall as a generation, there is definitely a much larger amount of us who don't want to do anything but stay inside all the time and don't want to go out, don't want to be social, whatever. And I realized that when I went to school, because the school that I went to was an all STEM school. And when you do all STEM and it's not specifically like engineering based, but more like computer programming and engineering, the people that you get are those kids. Like, never been outside, never want to do anything, have always been inside, playing video games, whatever, have no, like, very little worldly common sense, things like that, right? And I think there's a lot more of us in that space now with the type of entertainment that's available inside than there was before. So I think that's a legitimate complaint.
All right.
Yeah. And I think that transcends all of Gen Z and is not just specific to like a younger Gen Z. Because as a RA, and me and my friends that were RAs had to deal with it a lot, and it was just like, how did you make it this far? What is wrong with you? So yeah, I could see that being like a realistic complaint that actually happens quite a bit.
Okay. I think so. I agree.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's unfortunate, but I also feel like with the way entertainment is going and the amount that you can get, I kind of feel like it is the way it is now. The offering of outside entertainment versus inside entertainment is very similar. Like, there used to not be any entertainment that you could get on the inside, and now you can get almost all of it. So even for the basic things like food, right? Like for me and DoorDash or whatever,
right.
Like you can now get all of that.
Hey, groceries delivered. It's funny, the grocery delivery thing, because that went away. I'll just get the groceries myself. And now we come full circle back to grocery delivery.
Yeah, and COVID really made that worse, right? Because everybody started offering it. Every company that didn't offer it started offering it because it was the only way they could get by and stay open. And in some states, it was the only way legally they could stay open.
Right.
And so, I mean, that whole thing really amplified that part of us and just kind of made it everybody that was kind of on the fence of like about not going out. After that, we're just like, well, why would I?
This is great.
Yeah. So, yeah.
All right.
I think that's legit. That's all I got.
So you only got?
That's my, I don't know if that's a rant, but that's my,
I don't know if that's
my
a rant.
take on things that are going on right now. So, I don't know. Younger Gen Z,
trash.
I wish you luck. It's going to be a ruder awakening for you than I think it was for people my age.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what value they bring. I think every generation brings a value, right? They bring a nuisance, but they also bring a value. So let me get off my lawn hat on, and we're like, each generation brings less value and more nuisance. So I'm kind of curious about the younger Gen Z and even Gen Alpha is going to bring value-wise?
I think one of the values that they will bring, and maybe this is good for like a segue into another episode later, but I do think one of the values that they will bring is that they may not be able to do it in person, but because there's lots of things that are remote anyways, I think that they will just about be able to jump on any work call that is online, Teams call, whatever it is, and be able to instantly connect with everybody on that call because they're so used to doing that. Whereas most of us get on a Teams call and we're all like silent and awkward and like we're only talking if we absolutely have to. I think it will be the opposite for them. That like the collaboration online and on a Teams call will be
I think you're right.
dialed up.
I think right now with Teams meetings, there's a lot of presenteeism going on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm logged on, I'm getting credit, but I'm going to do something else which may or may not be work related.
You're right. Yeah. and I think that may actually start to go away with them because they are used to only interacting online. So when they get online, it'll just be like, it will be like they're more there in person than we are getting online.
I'm hoping that they will find a way of kind of ending the whole hourly wage concept and go to a productivity goals completion concept. So you're going to get $100 today, and these are the goals that we need to reach. And you get it done in 2 hours, get it done in 10 hours, whatever, you're still getting that money.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. And you got to be careful because they tried something similar to that in the like assembly and manufacturing. You got to put together 1,000 widgets in order to get paid, type of thing, or you get paid 1 penny per widget, and so now you know how many, and it actually takes 14 hours instead of 8 hours.
Yeah, there's a balance
Right.
to it for sure because there's a, being good at defining those expectations that are realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like the max it would take you would be a normal 8-hour day or 10-hour day or whatever the case may be. But if the person is good and efficient and they can get it done in 3, great, good for them. But it wouldn't go past the normal.
Right.
A normal person could do this in 8 hours or whatever, and it would be fine.
Right.
But yeah, definitely would need to be a balance.
All right.
All right, cool. Well,
That's podcast.
yeah, that's podcast. Younger gen, good luck. I wish you luck.
Yeah.
My gen, please maybe make some changes in the way you raise kids.
And my gen, enjoy the popcorn while you watch the world collapse around you.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for watching.
Peace be the journey.